Sub-Rector Ajiv delivered the news the way the Vekthari delivered most things, with complete confidence and a slight forward lean of the crest, which, in their body language, meant the matter was already settled. And the listeners' feelings about it were a courtesy they were extending, not a variable they had factored in. Your role, he said, has been absorbed by the efficiency matrix. The depot thanks you for your service. I said, where would you like me to be in the meantime? He hadn't expected a question. The crest tilted. The crew berths are available. Right, I said. I'll be in berth 7 if you need anything. He didn't write that down. That was the first small thing. I should explain what I did on Seth 4, because the Vekthari certainly couldn't have told you. On paper, I was a logistics coordinator, third attached, which, in the joint depot hierarchy, sat somewhere between a calibration tool and a piece of furniture. The Vekthari ran the depot. They ran it on instinct, seniority, and a rotating command structure, where whoever spoke loudest in a given cycle held authority for that cycle. They were very good at moving large things quickly. What they were less good at was the quiet infrastructure underneath. The sequencing, cross-referencing, the 17 small handshakes a supply chain needs to make before a single pallet moves correctly. That was me. I had been doing it for 2 years without anyone noticing, which is more or less the definition of doing it correctly. The efficiency matrix, as near as I could read it, was a Vekthari algorithmic system that modeled logistics flow on instinct weighting and seniority scoring. It was genuinely impressive. It had no column. For the things he did is the thing I didn't look like anything from the outside. They looked like background noise. I finished my current novel in about 6 hours. Then I started another one. At hour 11, the first raised voice from the depot floor. This was not unusual on Seth 4. I went back to my book. At hour 19, I heard 2 raised voices, and the particular resonance of Vekthari subharmonics that means, this is now a formal dispute, which is a different register from the ordinary raised voices, and carries a specific administrative weight. I made a note of the time and went to sleep. At hour 26, someone knocked on berth 7. It was a junior Vekthari deck operator named Sevarath, whose crest was cycling through 3 colors I'd learned to associate with I have been sent by someone who did not want to come themselves. He explained that there was a minor resupply complication and asked whether I had any observations. I said I had several, but asked whether the sub-rector had approved the consultation. Sevarath's crest went flat. I will confirm, he said, and left. I read another 40 pages. Nobody came back. I should describe what was happening on the depot floor, because I was hearing it in pieces and didn't have the full picture until later. What had begun was not a single failure. It was a sequence of small frictions, each individually manageable, collectively becoming a knot. The manifest routing for Hauler Bay 3 had been quietly failing for 19 hours because it was referencing a queue identifier I'd retired and replaced 2 months ago, and the new identifier lived in a cross-reference table I maintained manually. The efficiency matrix didn't know the table existed. When Bay 3's manifests stopped clearing, the duty officer rerouted them through Bay 5. Bay 5 then exceeded its cycle threshold, which triggered a coolant flush hold. The hold locked out Bay 5's berth clearances. 3 haulers sat grounded. Ajiv resolved that personally, with authority, by overriding the hold. The hold existed because if you ran a flush cycle late, you needed a 40-minute buffer before pressurizing the adjacent berthing arm, and if you skipped the buffer and pressurized anyway, you got a micro-seal failure in the arm connector about 60% of the time. I knew this because I'd written the procedure after the 3rd time it happened, 18 months ago, before I arrived. He didn't know the procedure existed because it was in a maintenance log, not the efficiency matrix, and I had not thought to mention it because it was, from my perspective, simply how you ran Bay 5. I was on page 212 when I heard the connector alarm. No serious damage. A partial seal, caught fast. But the berthing arm was down for inspection, which meant Bay 5 was fully offline, which meant the 3 haulers from Bay 3 were now joined by the 2 that had been queued for Bay 5, and the manifest backlog was beginning to develop a smell. At hour 31, Sub-Rector Ajiv knocked on berth 7 himself. He was doing the forward lean of settled authority, but his crest was an even, controlled gray, which in Vekthari read as, "I am maintaining composure, and I would like you to understand that this is effortful." He said there was a logistics situation that required a human technical perspective and asked if I was available. I said I was available. We walked to the depot floor. I looked at the board for a while, not a long while, 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. The shape of it was fairly clear once you knew what the pieces were. I asked Sevorath to pull the Bay 3 manifest queue, current and archived. I asked the overnight duty officer for the Bay 5 coolant log. I asked the dock supervisor for the berthing arm inspection report and an estimate on the seal repair. Then I started correcting things, in the order they needed correcting. The manifest routing took about 4 minutes to fix. I rebuilt the cross-reference link and flagged the retired queue identifier for permanent deletion so it couldn't snag anything else. The coolant procedure I walked Sevorath through step by step, told him where the written procedure lived and suggested he move a copy into the main operations file. The berthing arm was going to be down for 6 hours regardless, and I said so plainly, because it was going to be down for 6 hours regardless. Ajiv watched all of this without speaking. When the board was clear enough that the backlog had a visible path to resolution, I turned around. Ajiv's crest had shifted from controlled gray to something lighter. Not an apology in their body language. They don't have one that I've ever identified. More like a recalibration. An updating of the prior. He said, "The efficiency matrix does not appear to have captured your full function." Said, "No." He said, "We will need to discuss a revised operational role." I said, "I'd appreciate that. Also, do you know where my chair went? The one from the coordinator station. Someone moved it." Sevorath went to find the chair. I pulled up the manifest board and started on the next item in the queue. The depot hum settled back into its usual register. The particular frequency of a supply chain running close enough to correctly that nobody has to shout. I'd always found it a comfortable sound. Nobody called it background noise after that. At least, not where I could hear them.